Am I the a-hole for telling my mom she doesn't get to act like the victim when she named me after her late husband behind my dad's back? My mom was married to another guy before she was married to my dad. Her first husband was her childhood best friend, her first and only love until he died. They started dating as teenagers and got married in their 20s and were trying to have kids when he died. They were 28. My mom never loved anyone else again. She met and married my dad, but she never loved him. She married him because she was turned down as a single adoptive parent, and because people in her life told her she would find a way to be happy again. I'm their only kid, and she named me after her first husband. My dad didn't realize for years. Her husband's name was James, like his legal name. It's the one most people used for him. But my mom called him Hunter, and guess what my name is? Hunter. She told Dad she just really loved the name, and my dad liked it too, so he agreed. He only knew her first husband as James, so never made a connection. I was 10 when my dad found out. He found some letters that he initially thought were meant for me, but realized they were to the first husband. They ended up arguing for like 2 weeks straight, and that's how I learned Mom's feelings toward Dad and why she married him. I would sit up and listen to them when I was meant to be sleeping because it weirded me out to learn I was named after her first husband. She always had him very present in our lives. We had loads of photos in the house of him. She would talk about him a lot, and it was pretty clear she was still super in love with him. I only realized last year, but something she also did was switch her wedding ring from my dad out for her original wedding ring when my dad wasn't around. I remember her changing rings a lot when I was a younger kid, and when they divorced, she just always wore her original wedding ring. I wanted my name changed, and my dad does too, but Mom refuses to give her consent, which we need, and the judge has insisted both parents have to consent. My relationship with Mom is not good anyway. I'm not the kid she wanted, because I'm not James/Hunter's kid, but she also refuses to let me go, and just let me be Dad's kid. She'll sometimes try some performative parenting, but mostly it's sort of like we're roommates when I'm at her house instead of Dad's. I have to split my time every other week. The judge refused to let me make the decision. My mom's house has photos of her and James all over the place. It's like a shrine to him/to them. 2 days ago, she was crying to her former in-laws that we hate her and how awful my dad is to her. When the call ended, I told her she doesn't get to act like the victim when she lied to Dad about my name and named me after her dead husband behind Dad's back. And she won't let me change my name so I'm not creeped out by the history behind my name. She called me a self-absorbed brat and told me I will never understand her grief. I told her I understood the loss was devastating for her, but she used us and never even loved us. And that was horrible. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Oof, not the a-hole. I'm so sorry you are dealing with this. It sounds like you do have sympathy for your mom and understand she's a person who has not dealt with her grief in healthy ways. But that doesn't excuse how she has treated you. Making you a part of her shrine to her dead husband is a horrible thing to put on a child. You don't say how old you are, but I'm guessing mid to late teens. Hang in there. You will be able to change your name as soon as you turn 18. If you have a name you like, I would start using it and asking people who are not your mom to start using it too, so it's not such an abrupt switch. And you have a bit of a paper trail for your new name before you switch. I'm 60 now. I use a different name for the most part. I got some weirdness about it, but my dad is helping me. It's a good thing he's in your corner. Your mother is using you to manifest the man she lost, and that's not at all healthy for either of you. Did she try to steer you towards specific ways of dressing, behaving, activities, etc. that her late husband tended towards? I don't really remember, but she talked about him a lot and his likes/dislikes. I also know she used to imagine if I'd had a lighter shade of blue eyes and blonde hair, like her late husband had. Mom has serious psychological issues. Totally not the a-hole. If I was OP, I'd refuse visitation with Mom, and the moment I turned 18, I'd get my name changed legally. I can't refuse to visit. My dad would get the courts after him if I did, but I will stop going as soon as I can. Sweetie, I am so sorry you are a shrine to her dead husband. Next time she starts, tell her she needs therapy, and if she doesn't get it, keep telling her. Then tell her you'll go no contact when you're 18. Change your name to your dad's and add a junior. Then do it. Hopefully you don't have long to wait. Next story. Am I the a-hole for calling the police on my niece and not telling my sister beforehand? I, 24 female, have a sister, 35 female, who has a 16-year-old daughter. Her daughter has started rebelling and being a teenager. By being a teenager, I don't mean stealing. I mean being mouthy or thinking she's invincible and she knows better than everyone. But recently, she's gotten sticky fingers. She's been banned from the mall in our neighborhood. She was suspended from school for taking a girl's phone, and she's even tried to pawn her mother's wedding ring. I don't like my niece at my house for this reason. I've worked too hard for my things for them to be stolen. 2 weeks ago, I noticed the patio door was unlocked, and I make sure I lock all my doors before I leave. My fiancé suggested we get cameras, so we put cameras in the house. Last week, Wednesday, my fiancé and I went to go look at wedding venues and we were gone all day. When we got back, I only had to unlock the bottom lock to get in the house. So we checked the cameras, and sure enough, my niece and her friend somehow picked the lock to the window, and she was in our house for 2 hours with 2 guys. And they took some money from my purse, took 2 of my fiancé's Rolex watches. They also took my grandmother's wedding ring that she left for me when she passed away last year from cancer. They were eating snacks and watching TV, shoes on our table and couch, just like they live there and this is normal. I called my sister and told her what happened, and told her my niece had 2 days to give me everything back or I'd call the police, and she said she would handle it. Thursday comes around, nothing. Friday comes around, nothing. So I called the police, showed them the video, filed a report. I got a call later from my sister crying and screaming that I should have told her beforehand. I told her I gave her 2 days to come up with the stolen items, and I heard nothing back. And I told her I was going to call the police. She's lucky I gave her grace for 2 days. My mom called me and said that you don't have kids, so you don't understand. I told her it doesn't matter if I have kids or not. She committed a crime and brought 2 random people in my house. My safety's in danger. I don't get the whole you should have warned me. Warned her for what? So she could hide her? I don't think I did anything wrong. My sister and her husband said they won't be coming to our wedding, and I told them the invitation was revoked when your daughter stole my things. I've been getting threats from her husband now. I want to block them, but my fiancé says keep all the evidence in case something else happens. Not the a-hole. Your niece has some serious issues, and she needs to understand actions have consequences. Question though, how did she get into your house? The second time she snuck in through the kitchen window. That is terrifying. Imagine how we feel that she was bold enough to bring 2 strange men into our home. I don't feel safe here. Start going to local pawn shops to look for your stuff. Take pictures if you see it. Step outside the store. Call the cops. Also, check Etsy, eBay, FB Marketplace, Craigslist, etc. Definitely not the a-hole. You were incredibly generous to give them 2 days grace. Have you had any of the items since you called the police? Your sister and husband have absolutely no right to be rude and threatening. Maybe they can use that energy to deal with your niece. Not the a-hole. Your niece is a scumbag, and your sister is a crappy mom. And her husband is a crappy father. There's definitely a connection here. When I read that he was threatening them, I just said, yeah, naturally if her dad is a deadbeat, she's more likely to act out and get into criminal mischief. Edit. We do have a security system now. We've changed the locks. We were getting a safe for his watches and the more valuable stuff. We were planning on moving by the end of the year, and none of my family will know where I live now. I don't feel safe here, knowing 2 random men know where I live. My fiancé also says that we're getting a guard dog. We were already talking about getting a dog. No, this isn't just for guarding. We wanted one before, but we were waiting until we moved. Also, by beforehand, my sister meant like the day I called the police. Also, I have not gotten my things back as of yet, hopefully. I'm calling around to local pawn shops, checking Facebook, Craigslist, all of it. For all the people calling me names over calling the police, you're also not giving me any other solutions. I did not want to call the police, which is why I gave her 2 days. I don't think any of you know how unnerving it is to have your home broken into. You don't know how unsafe it feels to walk into your home, scanning if anything is gone, hearing a creak and wondering if they came back. These 2 random men she brought know where I live. I should feel safe here, but I feel anything but that. If this had been someone else's home, she could have been seriously hurt or dead. Hopefully this was a wake-up call. If she needed money, she could have asked me, not broke into my home with two men who are still on the streets and could come back at any moment and do Lord knows what. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my cousin I am not sorry about what happened to her dad's life after he hit me? My aunt used to be married to a guy called John, and they had my cousin Abby. John was a pretty awful guy. I knew that even at a young age. Our whole family hated him. He was a drunk, belligerent, had a temper, all the usuals. My aunt was blind to it. One day when I was 8, I was over at their house with Abby, and my aunt was supposed to be watching us. I can't remember the circumstances of why I was there, but my mom insists they must have been desperate for childcare. Anyway, my aunt was supposed to be there and John was supposed to be at work, but she gave me a phone just in case of emergencies. John came home at some point during the day and went straight to bed. Me and Abby were playing in a room and my aunt was downstairs. I guess we were making too much noise because John woke up and totally lost his mind. He stormed into the room, screaming at us. It all happened pretty quickly, but from what I remember, he shoved Abby to the ground and kicked her. Not hard, just sort of pushed her with his foot while she tried to get up. I ran and hid behind a bed, but he came and grabbed me. He dragged me over the middle of the room and slapped me. Again, not that hard, but enough to make me cry, because I'd never been hit before. My scream brought my aunt into the room and she was pretty scared. I remember her being really upset, and John defending himself saying we needed to learn to be quiet, and it was her fault for not watching us while he was sleeping. Eventually, he left the room and my aunt was comforting me. She begged me not to tell my mom. She offered me money and ice cream to stay quiet. I was so scared that I agreed. But right after we had ice cream downstairs, I went to the bathroom and called my dad and told him what happened. 20 minutes later, my dad shows up and demands to see John. I won't describe in too much detail what happened, but John ended up in the hospital after my dad was done with him. It was made clear that John was no longer welcome in the family and that my aunt wouldn't receive any more financial support if she stayed with him. So she left. John's life kind of fell apart after that. I never worked very much and mostly lived off my aunt, who was living off my parents and grandparents. He had nowhere to live, inconsistent income, was couch surfing for a while, his drinking got worse. He has been in and out of Abby's life ever since. Abby has hated me since the incident. She blames me for her family falling apart. I think it's kind of fair enough that she keeps her distance from me. I was a large part of why things happened the way they did, and that hurts her. The problem is, she never shuts up about it. Every family event is just her complaining and sniping that she doesn't have a dad anymore because of me. The rest of the family do tell her to knock it off, but she always cries, and that just ends the conversation. She gets worse about it when John drops contacting her for a few months. All this being said, we had a big Easter dinner at my grandparents' house and Abby was again complaining she hadn't seen her dad in months because he was away working across the country, and it was sad that at his age he had to take these kinds of jobs because he lost his family over some whining brat, aka me, who had never apologized. I won't lie, I was a little hungover. I just got off a plane. I was not at my most gracious, but I had just had enough. Before anyone else could tell her to knock it off, I said I wasn't the least bit sorry about what happened to her dad. I said he was an abusive POS, and just because she was okay with him hitting children doesn't mean anyone else was, and that if he had had two brain cells that weren't constantly fighting, maybe he'd have been smart enough to keep his unhinged behavior focused on the people who would put up with it. Well, that didn't go down well. Abby completely broke down, trashed her plate and glass, called me a psychopath, and left. My mother, stepdad, grandma, and aunt think I went overboard. Grandpa and stepbrother are on my side. Now for the top comments. Hard not the a-hole. She needed to hear it. And you need to keep telling her the truth. Also, trashing her dinner place? Apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree, has it? I was thinking the same thing. But you know what? Aunt is to blame for all of this. Not only did she try to bribe me, she got a cold press for my face in hopes of stopping any bruising. That worked because John didn't even hit me that hard, but he left a bruise on my arm which she didn't notice. She would probably have accused me of lying if my dad had let her get a word in. Damn, that's so true and so cunning. I don't understand how Abby can blame an 8-year-old kid for what her grown-ass dad did. Kudos to your dad, Opie. He definitely knocked some sense into John. Ask your parents to find out from Abby what her parents told her, if it's possible. It's unfair on the family that is financially helping your aunt if she did indeed lie to Abby. The adults need to tell your aunt Abby needs therapy. Right? Like they're supporting their family. Why? I don't think I would pay for anything unless they all completely owned up to the bad behavior. Except maybe the therapy for the child, if they were so inclined. The aunt's a lost cause. Abby's acting more like her dad, it seems. Also, her mother made a choice. She should have her act together so that she wasn't reliant on your parents and grandparents for financial help. And John should have had his act together so he wasn't reliant on his baby mama, who was in turn reliant on her family. Her dad made a choice to be abusive. He made a choice to not be independent. And he made a choice to not see his daughter. And the aunt made a choice of putting John above her daughter. A mother's job is to protect her children. She chose to be with John over living with her daughter. It's ridiculous to blame the 8-year-old girl for being slapped by the grown man. Incredible level of victim blaming. John chose to drink, hit children, etc. by his own. He made his own bed by his very own hands. You're not the a-hole by anyways. John, your aunt and Abby are. OP is being blamed for telling. Her nuclear family was broken up because their secret that John was an abuser was exposed. As Abby sees it, if OP had stayed quiet, the extended family would have continued to help the aunt out without requiring that she is separate from John. In effect, Abby believes that staying silent about being victimized was the right price to pay to keep her father around, and she resents that OP would not stay silent. I would bet anything that her father is the source of this perspective. He probably tells her that if OP hadn't made a big deal about a little slap, their family would be intact. Definitely, Abby has problems. But the aunt, who accepted the abuse and tried to get OP to hide it, is to blame for going along with this narrative. Instead of teaching Abby not to accept this treatment and encouraging her to rejoice that they were free of their abuser, the aunt seems to have accepted the narrative that she had to give him up in order to continue getting financial support from the family. And she may not like it that Abby attacks OP verbally, but she doesn't seem to have done anything to stop Abby's whining accusations. She sounds like a bigger piece of work than her daughter.